Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kouryer Podcast. Welcome to episode 214 of Kouryer Podcast. Our today's guest is Miss Colleen Peck Larson. She's a senior character artist at Naughty Dog from Sandiego United States. And of course, before we get into the signature questions of the podcast, let me quickly mention in the for contact section of the captions, you can find the ID to her Instagram account, the links to her website, Twitter, and art station. And in the website thing it's not technically, I think, a website. It's just, those three link things when you can find the links to all her other socials. So yeah, in the website section, you can click on that. It's like colleenpecklarson.cart.co. So yeah, with that out of the way, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right. By the way, what time is it exactly there?
8:20 p.m.
Yeah, I think we talked about it, before we started recording, but this is just, fun trivial fact. Like, this is actually the earliest I've ever woken up for an episode. So, yeah, it's actually 6:20 a.m. here, and I have to be careful not to speak too loud because my neighbors might, just ring the bell right now because I'm in one of those apartment complexes where the walls are this thin. Mm-hmm. So if someone sneezes, four other,
I've been there.
Yeah.
That's very early for me, so thank you.
No worries. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so let's actually jump into the first signature question of the podcast, which is give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us the story of your origin story of how you decided to become an artist.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a time in my life that I wasn't drawing, and I don't know. I always joke that I came out of the womb drawing. In fact, I don't think there was a time in my life that I considered any other career. Even from a young age, I knew that was all I wanted to do, which I think, is not really the case most of the time. So grew up drawing, just, watching Disney movies, playing video games, watching Star Wars and Indiana Jones and, all those things that kind of influence you as a kid. I loved, comics like Sunday paper and all those things. For a while, I wanted to be a comic artist. I think I remember my parents buying me How to Draw Comics, those series of books when I was, in middle school, and, kind of that's where I started learning anatomy, and my interest actually turned to animation, kind of late middle school, into high school. I actually wanted to work at Pixar as an animator, or Disney or something. I attended a month-long boot camp at CalArts in my junior year of high school, and it was almost like a preview of college, and it was an amazing experience. But I started to get the inkling that animation might not be my thing. I love drawing, I love painting, but actually maybe animation, might not be my thing. And this was actually kind of confirmed when I started at San Jose State, which is I attended their animation illustration program from 2011 to 2016. One of the very first classes you take is, the initial drawing class where you're animating on a piece of paper and flipping the papers back and forth. Basically, the old school method of animation. And it was fun, but I also realized okay, I don't have the patience for this, and also I'm not that great at it. And so it was okay, what do I really love to do? I can spend all day drawing and painting. I can spend weeks and months on one illustration and one project. And so I decided to kind of focus on visual development, and basically moved into pursuing concept art for games. And, ever since I was a kid, Naughty Dog was a really, really big part of my life. From Crash Bandicoot 2 days, I always say that like I grew up with Naughty Dog because, as I matured, their games also matured. You go from Crash Bandicoot to Jack and Daxter, and that series like slowly kind of matures as it progresses, and then you move into Uncharted, and then after that it's like Last of Us. So it's just this kind of evolution that I feel like I was on, parallel to how the studio was evolving over time, and their games remained my favorite. And anyone who knew me knew like I was like the Naughty Dog girl, like always drawing, and making up my own characters, anyway. But yeah, so at San Jose State, part of their program is even when you're in the illustration track, you're required to take 3D courses, and they didn't particularly stick with me at first. It was just kind of like it felt very like foreign to me, like almost learning a completely new language, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. Like, it didn't really click for me at first. But the semester before my senior year at San Jose State, I had to take my final like advanced 3D class. And the funny thing is, like, I hadn't taken 3D in like 3 years prior to that. So I had forgotten almost, like, I was super rusty. Like, I'd forgotten how to use Maya and ZBrush and all this stuff. But the assignment, like, for the first half of the semester was like, show me a concept you want to do, I'll approve it. And then you guys just make this character for the first half of the semester. And honestly, that is the thing that sparked my interest, because I was just like, I got back into ZBrush, I got into Mudbox, where these two, like, obviously ZBrush is a little bit, it's a little bit, it's got a steep, degree of entry, right? But Mudbox is a little bit more intuitive. So I just started realizing, like, I really love this. And it was almost instantaneous, where I was just like, I started reconsidering my path. But, I'd already completed some, many years of school to be a concept artist. So I was like, what, I'll just finish my last year as a concept artist. And I ended up getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts in illustration. But during that year, I was doing my own sculpts, and I was doing like, a little bit of like freelance, like 3D concept work and stuff. And, upon graduation, I basically, a call for entry went out to our graduating class, through one of our alumni. His name's Colleen Peck. And he was the art director of a small team, which was a part of a bigger team, at a company called Linden Lab. They're known for Second Life, but at the time they were building like a social VR like experience, like a pretty like ambitious social game. And so, like, I actually went into the interview thinking that it was going to be for like a 2D position. And I like included some of my ZBrush sculpts, which, at the time, like, looking back on them, I'm like, there's not much to them, but I mean, they're like poly painted, like, but I guess they saw potential there. So in the middle of the interview, they go, so this is actually a 3D position. And I just said to them, honestly, I was just like, I don't know. I don't know much of anything about game art. I can like sculpt a little bit in ZBrush, but like, I don't even know what a normal map is, guys. Like, I gotta be honest. And they just said, that's okay. Like, we'll teach you. And they actually hired myself and two other of my concept art focused classmates as 3D artists on their team. So I was the only character artist, and then the other two people were environment artists, and just those first few months were just crazy, insane, like levels of learning, constantly asking questions, like, learning ZBrush, learning Maya, learning Substance Painter, learning Marvelous Designer, like, the cornerstones of, everything that I use still today. But yeah, like, it was just an amazing team. We had like guys from ILM, we had, guys from, 2K, and like all these different studios kind of come together in this small team. And it was an amazing environment, just the best environment to start my career. I was there for a couple of years, and I started to feel like I'm ready to kind of spread my wings. I'm ready to, like, kind of forge ahead in my ambitions. And I actually ended up interviewing with several different companies. But lo and behold, like, I see a job listing for PlayStation, and I was like, no way. Like, I didn't even know this studio existed. And a lot of people don't know that PlayStation Visual Arts exists. They're a little bit under the radar, but it just so happened that they were looking for their first character artist to work on The Last of Us Part 1, or what would become The Last of Us Part 1. And so, yeah, in 2018, I went down there. I basically got to see this team and this game evolve from absolute infancy into something being worked on by hundreds of people. And, now millions of people get to enjoy it around the world. And in that meantime, I also got to work on Last of Us Part 2. So it's always a story that, like, I tell where, like, I actually didn't know what I'd be working on at PlayStation until my first day. So they're giving me the tour of the studio, and my lead goes, yeah, so you'll be working on, a remake of The Last of Us for PS5. And I almost fell over. Like, I almost, like, just kind of, like, blacked out a little bit, just like, because the PS5 hadn't even been announced at that time. And I'm like, I'm going to be remaking my favorite game of all time. You got to be kidding me. And so, yeah, and then also working on Last of Us 2, I never dreamed that I'd ever get to work on that game. So yeah, just being able to work on both of those titles, and then now, so I was at PlayStation for 4 years. And I, again, decided, like, I think it's time for the next step. And so now I've been at Naughty Dog since January. And, yeah, I mean, working with Naughty Dog from PlayStation, it was an amazing collaboration. And, I was just like, yeah, this feels like a natural transition for me. And both teams are just amazing. And it's an amazing, super surreal privilege to be able to work with both of those teams now. So, yeah, that's my long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was great. And I love when people get into the flow of their stories. And yeah, that's actually really interesting. Like, a couple of points that came into my mind that I really want to ask you is actually, you mentioned you were studying, like, fine arts.
I never pursued fine arts, but the program at San Jose State is mostly focused on, like, feature film, like, basically preparing you for working at, like, a feature film studio like Disney or Pixar. And so they focus really heavily on the artistic fundamentals. So, the important stuff, the figure drawing, the perspective, the value, the design, all the really, really crucial building blocks. But yeah, fine art was, I don't think ever, like, in my brain, it was I always, like, kind of focused on entertainment for my career. Yeah.
Like illustration and concept art and stuff like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And the reason I'm asking you this is because I've heard that, of course, having, you don't necessarily have to have a degree to get into our job, but mostly they want you to have some sort of degree, even a 2-year degree, and
Hmm.
that's just because they want you to know that you've performed in a professional setting. That's basically it. That, oh, okay, this person has been into university or college, so they're familiar, to some extent, with the norms and everything. So, and that's one of the things that I've recently, thought about it that way, because I was like, because I haven't graduated college or university ever. And, yeah, one of my friends told me that, it's really important to go to college or university related to your field. So, when the employers see your, credentials, they say, oh, this person has been through some sort of professional setting. But another thing is, even for example, if it's fine art, does it have to be exactly related to your major, or does it have to be, just something? Even art related is enough. Like, if they see a portfolio, they like it, but they see, for example, oh, this person studied fine arts, for example, or something else kind of related to that. And is it still acceptable, or does it have to be, related to your, field?
I think because our industries have become so incredibly competitive, I think that the more focused you can be with just targeting what you want to do in the end, like the better. However, my story is a case in point where, I studied all my life, 26 years 2D art, and then all of a sudden I'm switching my path to 3D, but everything I'd learned up to that point fed into my ability to switch over to 3D. So it's like, in my book, like, no effort is wasted, because everything that you learn in your life, even if it's not art related, like can feed into and basically inform your artistic eye, your basically your sense, and also your skill. But yeah, I think, ideally you would choose a direction and go in that direction, and that direction might end up changing. Like, I could never have foreseen how my path would change over time. Like, I was like just laser focused on like becoming a concept artist for games, and my focus has always been on characters even since I was a kid. And so during, leading up to graduation, I was like, you know, character concept artist, like that's a really unique like role. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like get a job specifically in that. So those were the kinds of things I was facing leading up to graduation until, my opportunity with Linden Lab appeared. But yeah, I would urge people to be as focused as they can, and, at the same time, I think just letting your interests be your guide, like staying true to yourself and really, really trying to dig deep and find what really excites you and inspires you. Yeah.
All right. And it's kind of funny. I just noticed something. Since the last time I used Zencaster, like in 2 weeks ago, it wasn't like this, but apparently they've changed it. And we have a time limit apparently, if for the
Oh,
free version of and it's only 101 minutes remaining. Don't worry. So we have time for now.
okay.
But
Plenty of time.
it's so weird. Yeah. The free
That's
version used to
annoying.
be, yeah, I know. Like,
Free
it's
is not so free
capitalism. Yeah,
anymore.
of course, as soon as like a company or service sees
Yeah.
they have like, big enough user base, they start to monetize things. And
Yep.
that's actually the point of it. I mean, it's fine, but yeah, hopefully they don't reduce that time remaining to like, 30 or 40 minutes. That was
Yeah.
so annoying.
If we need to do it in segments, that's okay too.
Yeah, I'll do whatever, but pay them, to be honest. Like, it's
Yeah.
weird. And all right. Also, Here's the thing. So you've kind of explained by now, and of course by the introduction is kind of self-explanatory, where your main branch of design is 3D senior 3D character art. But I was wondering, when you're trying to focus on a niche when it comes to both in skills and also style. I went through your portfolio, and at first I've seen some stylist stuff. What led you to change path to more realistic style and the things you've been doing lately?
That's an awesome question. It's actually not a question that I get too often on like talks or podcast or like panels or anything. So I mean, people do ask me this like on social media or whatever, but yeah, it's something that like a lot of people wonder about. And it's actually something I struggled with for a long time because my interest in stylized and realistic is like almost equal. I like each for different reasons. And I think, throughout school, like my work kind of walked that line between stylized and realistic. And I remember as a student, I would get feedback where they're like, you should probably push in one direction or the other. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is just what's coming out of my pen. Like, this is just what's coming out of from all of my influences throughout my life and what I like to draw. So like, it was a real challenge switching from 3D. Like, I think I started off, doing more stylized stuff because I didn't have the skill set to do the realistic yet. And so I was doing stylized work while at Linen Lab, but also I was taking classes for 3D character art. I remember taking a class through Game Art Institute, which I think is now called Vertex School, from Adam Scutt, who was a former Naughty Dog artist, and he's now I believe he's at Epic Games. But his class like kind of changed my life, and that was a realistic class. So it was kind of like, I was getting exposed to the realistic side of things, discovering people's work, like Raf Grassetti, Frank Zing, Glauco, Longy, the greats, discovering those guys, when I was first early on in my 3D career. And I continued to study that while doing like some stylized work on the side. And the work that I was doing early in my career, I was going for a realistic, look, but I could never like quite like get there. And it just took me time to get there. I think it's still a challenge for me. I mean, working at Naughty Dog and PlayStation, it's like, you think like, yeah, you're working in a realistic style, but at the same time, if you look at any of Naughty Dog's work, like there's always an element of stylization there. And so I think that almost that challenge that used to be like, so difficult for me, like, is almost coming in handy at this point. But yeah, there was a time in my 3D career where it was just like, I want to do both, so, and I mean, at this point, I just have to do stylized on my own time. But I absolutely think both work hand in hand. Because, with stylized work, if you don't have the structural understanding, if you don't have the anatomical understanding of what you're making, like, it's not going to ring true for people. And you have to learn the rules in order to know how to break them properly. But yeah, what used to be an incredible challenge for me, has, I feel like, actually become a big benefit for me. It just came down to, and in terms of like learning how to do realistic stuff, it just came down to just trying and studying. Yeah. I think,
All right.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. No worries.
Okay, good.
And here's the thing. Now, this is, I think, a really appropriate time to ask this question. How does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a design project? Like basically, what does the structure of your pipeline personally looks like?
Sure. My personal pipeline looks somewhat similar to like what I do at work. I think what I like to do a lot of times is I will start with like just a generic base mesh, like, body, head, and like 3D Scan Store is probably my favorite resource for this because they have really amazing, just a massive library of the most high quality 3D scans you can almost like basically you can get online. Texturing XYZ has also amazing stuff. I don't use their stuff as much. But yeah, usually I'll start with just a generic base mesh and gather reference. I mean, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but the first the first step is to kind of like find a project that you're really, really excited about. So for me, with my Frollo project, I went and I saw like a stage musical of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the tone of the whole like musical was like much darker. It was the Disney musical, but it was like much darker and like much more like mature, amazing costume design. Like it just like super inspired me, and I was like, the next chance I get, that's gonna be my next project. And so it's like it's really important to come up with an idea that just like keeps you up at night. You're so excited to work on it. It's like you lay there awake, like thinking about all the stuff you want to do. Because like a few months in, the like honeymoon period of that is going to be gone, and you're just going to be like trying to grind through and finish your project. So, once I have an idea, like I'll spend quite a bit of time like gathering reference. Like I think so many young artists like think that using reference is like cheating, which is like crazy to me. Like literally the best artists use reference. Like you think about even the old masters, they're sculpting and painting from life. They're using literally direct reference. Like the best thing, like that the best feeling to me is finding the perfect reference and going, I'm going to copy that and it's going to look awesome. So yeah, reference is like super key. Like if you look at my pure ref for my Frollo project, it did span several years, but like it's like a massive, massive pure ref file with just hundreds of images. And then after that I will start with the base mesh. I use Marvelous Designer for clothing, and then also like hand sculpting the cloth. Yeah. I work in like I still work in like a game art pipeline, so high poly, and then making your low poly, and then texturing, UVing, texturing, rendering. For my own projects, I like to kind of like remove some of the restrictions that I have to work under at work. So my meshes are like really, really pretty high poly, even on the lowest subdivision. I mean, the important thing to remember is like, even if you're working on a personal project, like maintaining good topology is only going to help you and save you time, especially like when you're trying to sculpt something. Like it's better to kind of like front load a lot of the work into like really clean topology, because you're going to thank yourself later when you're sculpting on that and you're not having to deal with crappy like resolution and stuff. But yeah, so like Frollo, for example, like my low poly for him was just like the level 3 or 4 of his ZBrush meshes, and I even sometimes would decimate pieces of it, because for him, like I decided that I wanted him to be a showpiece. Like I didn't want him to be a game character, even though he was created in the game art pipeline. and rendered in Marmoset, which is like a real time, you know, renderer. But I was like, yeah, he's not going to move. So I just sculpted all his entire body like in pose, so like I could get all, as much fidelity from his clothing as I could. But yeah, it's essentially my pipeline is essentially like a game art pipeline, but just with like really high res meshes and high res textures. Yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing. And now here's another interesting question, which is I always get really fun answers from people when I ask this. What was the first art job paycheck you ever got? What was it for, and how did you feel at the time? Basically, the first amount of money you made out of art, doing art. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Commissions on deviantart.com.
For 2D stuff, right?
Yeah.
Fan art, what was it?
Yeah, like people's original characters. Yeah, they would like, hit me up on
OCs,
DA.
yeah.
Yeah. And then, send me a bunch of images of like other commissions they had done or drawn themselves. And they're like, I'd love to see this character in your style, which is like a huge honor. It's like, okay, you're trusting me with your child. Okay. Thank you. That was super fun. I did that for a couple of years in college. I'd worked retail previously, and the Barnes and Noble that I was working at closed, and I was like, I'm just going to do commissions. But yeah, after that, I worked at several different like mobile game companies. And I did like, freelance work. Like I'd even do stuff like drawing like orthographic views for different game companies. I did orthographic stuff for like Wizard of the Coast and like the company the studio that develops the Civilization games, Fire Axis. Yeah, so those were like super early in college. Yeah, and obviously like my ambition was AAA games. So working for mobile and like working on freelance stuff, isn't exactly what I want to do, but it was like I was just happy to get anything at that point. So yeah, starting, humble beginnings. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it. I don't remember the MySpace days or the early Facebook days, but I remember when the early 2010s how popular DeviantArt was, and among
Super
artists like,
popular.
yeah, I remember I made my first DeviantArt, and but by the way, mind you, by the way, I was always an artistic kid, so I always loved art, but I just started to slowly realize, oh, I can become an artist like 4 or 5 years ago. But this is even before that, what I'm talking about. I remember like at the time in DeviantArt, a lot of artists were active there, even the artists that were in the big AAA companies. And you would just follow someone who's like a senior character artist on like, 343 Industries or, Bungie or something, and they would follow you back and they would message you. That's how like, non-saturated social media for art was,
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. I feel
It is interesting you mentioned that, because something that I always try to say to people, in these kinds of talks, I never know who's going to be watching it. And it's like, you can still reach out to the people you admire for advice. Sometimes they might not reply. But like, I am where I am today because I did. And you can't wait till you think you're ready to do that. You can't wait till you think you're good enough to reach out to someone that you admire for advice. Like, you got to just kind of go for it. So.
Yeah, and the problem is, with most artists, it's like a majority introverted, community, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is, it's even if they want to reach out to someone, is their anxiety, social anxiety, and don't know how to write, how to express themselves. These are some of the barriers, and they need to work on. And honestly, I think to anyone who's listening, the sooner you start working on that, I know just and a good way to step out of your character and do things you would never do is to make an alt. I know it sounds kind of like, crazy and kooky, but honestly, this is something that helped me a lot. Is to make an alter ego for yourself. Don't be yourself. I know that sounds weird. Everyone says be yourself, but actually, don't be yourself. Make an alter ego, a version of yourself, and just be that. So when you see it that way, and not just with emails or anything like that, Jesus, but in general in life, when you meet new
Yeah.
people, and sure, you're not really, you're kind of antisocial maybe, or you're not that social, or whatever. However, the degree of your anxiety might be when it comes to social anxiety, just imagine you're some charismatic, fun to be around person, even though you want to be alone all the time. Because listen, I'm an introvert at heart myself. I know it sounds weird because I've talked to so many people on the podcast, but I'm an introvert at heart. Honestly,
Me too.
I love to just stay on a farm, out, just far away from civilization, and just chill on my own. Just
Yeah,
how
my dream is to just be a hobbit. Just
that
live by
sounds lovely.
myself somewhere.
I
Yeah.
was gonna extend what I said was my dream life is actually the Shrek in Shrek 1 before he meets
In the
anyone.
swamp.
Honestly, just a swamp,
Oh, that's
nourishing, stay
amazing.
in my lane, moisturized.
Yeah.
That meme, yeah,
Yeah. Moisturized
yeah, that
in my
whole meme,
lane.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just
Yeah.
doing that, it really helps. Just have like an alter ego version of yourself. Whenever you feel kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And majority of people, honestly, not just in art, in anything, that's the craziest thing. In anything, if you message someone and ask for advice, and you're like, and I know it sounds weird to say, but energy can be easily felt by each human, even through text.
100%.
So when they feel that, oh, this person is actually interested to learn what I'm passionate about, so they would be more than happy to help you most of the time. Of course, sometimes they might be too busy, or they might not even see your message or something, but it's
Exactly.
always you miss 100% of shots you don't take. So yeah.
Literally. Yeah. And you never know. They might miss your message, or you could get a mentor. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah, we all have our personas that we kind of put on in each situation. And I think we need to just learn how to do that. And, as long as you're, adopting an attitude of humility and teachableness, I think that attitude will do wonders, for people who you're reaching out to. And not only that, but also people you're interviewing with or working with. People will notice those kinds of attitudes. And also
Yeah.
they will notice the inverse of that. If people like, I've had the chance to like make decisions in terms of like hiring people for our teams, and it's like, if certain people like, certain people get filtered out because of their egos. Like, they could be a really amazing artist, but it's like, if I can tell that they're going to be a pain in the ass to work with, like, that's a nope from me. Like, attitude is everything. Yeah.
That's actually a really good thing we can talk about. As you were, during the time you were, in charge of, hiring people, what were some of the major red flags that, that was kind of, red flags for you, and also green flags that were like, really interesting for you? Like, that was really interesting and useful for anyone who's listening.
Yeah. So in terms of like green flags, like I just mentioned, someone who's energetic. Yeah. Like you said, energy matters, someone who seems humble, someone who seems, also confident, because like, I don't know, you have to strike a balance, because when you're in an interview, you're selling your skills, you're selling yourself, and you have to kind of like, you have to present yourself in a way that is as appealing as possible, so you have to still have confidence in your work, and yet be humble still. Yeah, energy, humility, again, like the teachable nature, the willingness to learn, and obviously like artistic skill makes a difference. Someone with a quality over quantity type of portfolio. Like, I'd rather see someone wanting to come in as a junior. Like, I'd rather see someone with like 2 or 3 really, really strong pieces and like finished characters that look amazing than like someone who has like, 10 kind of mediocre ones. Because I want to see how people are able to just like push themselves. A lot of times we will kind of give someone a little bit of feedback during an interview and see how they react. Because a lot of what people don't realize, like before they get into the industry, is, none of this is about you. It's like you are, the moment you step onto a team, like you're part of something larger than yourself. And, if someone's giving you feedback on something, like all feedback does need to be taken with a grain of salt. Sometimes if you get too much feedback from different directions, it can be confusing and it can end up going in a bad direction. But for the most part, if someone's giving you feedback, if you incorporate that feedback, your character, your whatever you're working on is going to be better for it. And so, again, just like leaving that ego off to the side, like, hey, you're right. Like, this does need to be more like this or whatever. So a lot of times we will do a little bit of a test to where we'll give some feedback to them during the interview and see what their reaction is. And, the red flags, it's just like ego, because you can see those things, you can sense those things from someone. If someone thinks that they know everything, like you can tell. And the fact is, nobody knows everything, and there's always someone who knows something else that you don't know. So, I think that's the big one for me.
Yeah, like that's a little bit tricky because it's so weird, because I've seen a lot of also, this, like, they're not bad artists, but sometimes it's weird when I see, like, when they have this kind of egotistical side to them. And I mean, it's a healthy thing to have ego, I guess, but it has its own limits. Yeah,
Yeah.
like as soon as it starts to turn you into a close-minded person, that just means, all right, this person will not grow anymore. That's just him at his peak. And I don't think a company or any studio or a team, let's just look at it this way. I'm going to use the term team. I don't think a team would be interested in having someone on board when they don't have the potential to grow.
I think that's an amazing quote. Yeah, that's an amazing point. No matter what position you start at, like whether you're a junior or a principal coming into a new studio, the reason why you join a new studio is so you can grow. And I think that's one of the best things about being an artist is that, as long as you continue to have that hunger for learning and knowledge, like you're going to learn for the rest of your life. You're going to continue growing for the rest of your life if you adopt that growth mindset. That's an amazing point.
Yeah, that's like, here's the thing. People like tend to, because there's so many tips and advices out there with different type of flavors of expressing how people have been expressed it. But I think the main thing I would try to dumb it down and simplify it is just imagine, like, do you know about the anime One Piece?
I've never watched it, but I'm aware of it.
But the premise is basically they're like, every single pirate crew and pirate and just people in the world wants to get to the One Piece, which is like the biggest treasure of, in the world of the One Piece, right? That's the whole, basically the plot in the shortest way possible. And the way I would, say this, when if you want to know if you're going to be a good fit for a company or not, just look at this. You're a pirate and you're not with a crew, and you want to join a crew so your crew can get the One Piece. So are you a really useful crew member or not? Can you really add something to the crew or not? Look at what they need, and even the crews put what they need actually for what type of crew member they need. So see if you fit into that, and not just fit into that. Are you going to stand out among other people? And like what what's gonna make you stand out? It sounds so simple. I know, it sounds really cliche and generic and simple, but it's if you really shift your perspective like that, you start to realize, oh, for example, my strength is in foliage. I should probably make some foliage posts, or my strength it's in hair. I really love stylized hair, or
Hmm.
stuff like that. So you start to see what's really unique to your
Yeah.
methodology and work, and like you start to focus on your strong suits to make yourself stand out. So that's one way.
I
And
totally agree. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think people sometimes like wonder, like, what makes me stand out? And I think the guiding light is like, what do you love doing most? Because that's what people will notice. It's like I think a lot of people, they feel like they need to be good at everything, so they put their effort into like a larger pool of things. And I mean, I think you and I are total opposites, where like you're like, I want to do everything, and I'm like, I just want to do characters. And so like, for me, like staying true to that throughout my entire life, like has only served me well. Just sticking to what excites me, what inspires me. Um, you know, because that excitement, that energy, like that comes across in your work, and people can tell if you love what you're showing them. You know, so I think people should use that as a guiding principle. So,
yeah, definitely. And all right, here's like a question that a lot of people sometimes have trouble answering. Don't worry, it's nothing personal. It's, who are your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
oh my gosh, how do I even start? I guess I got to start with the dead guys. So Bernini, you know, um, Michelangelo, Van Dyke, Norman Rockwell, all those old dead guys. Just, us building on top of their legacy, us standing on the shoulders of giants. Man. Adam Hughes. The big ones also, like the 3D guys. The guys I mentioned earlier, like Raph, Glauco, Frank. Here I am working with Frank as well, like, daily. It's like kind of crazy, He's an awesome guy, awesome artist. Oh man. And there's so many amazing stylized artists too. Leticia Gillett, she's the sweetest person you'll ever meet, like amazing artist. My first mentor from Linden Lab, his name's Omar San Cristobal. He's at Pixar now. Like I think I improved as an artist just like sitting next to him, Man, there's just so many. It's like I'm just gonna forget, but yeah, I probably have like a whole bookshelf full of ones that I could cite, but yeah, that's a pretty good list right there.
Yeah, and the reason I said most people have problem with this question is the answer is kind of obvious, but it's like, as artists we're really visual people, so we're good with visuals. We can recognize people from their works and styles, but not necessarily with their written names.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people. And another thing is when you ask someone a question like that, it's so vague and general. It's so daunting sometimes. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, ooh, where should I start?
There's too many.
But here's the thing. Here's a kicker. When you start to think about that, after a couple of seconds, you don't answer the question. Your brain does. Your subconscious
Mm-hmm.
does. So a couple of names quickly pop into your head, and those are the real answers, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's actually the tactic if you want to get some sort of information like that out of people. first they get, pressured and like, oh my God, what should I say? But then they quickly come up with the answer,
The memories start jogging.
Yeah.
It's like a snowball effect, basically.
Yeah. And all right, so now let's actually speak about something that I think is going to be really useful for a lot of people. Any advice and tips for a good portfolio and resume for artists, and of course, in this case, 3D art, character artists? Any specific
Sure.
thing that you think it's worth mentioning?
I think like the big thing is, if people are applying to a 3D character art role, like they need to have real-time rendered characters and like literally like the full character. And also not only a full character, but also that character needs to be posed in a nice way that kind of shows the character's personality. Because I feel like a lot of times like students will like they'll render characters in like Maya, or something like that. And it's like, that's not applicable. Sorry, guys. You gotta demonstrate to us that you understand the game art pipeline, and rendering in real time, because that's literally what you're going to be doing all day, every day. A lot of times people don't realize like how little of the job is actually sculpting. Sometimes you get to sculpt a ton. Like, sometimes you spend like a week or 2 weeks like sculpting, and that's like super fun, but there's so much more to the job than that. And a large part of the job is actually like, getting your character to, to look good in the game. And if you don't have actual game art characters in your portfolio, like that doesn't tell us anything. So I think that's the big one for me. Showing hands, showing, really good heads. Again, like the quality over quantity thing, like I'd rather see 3 great projects or 2 great projects even, rather than like 10 like mediocre ones. And sometimes like gauging that yourself is hard to do. I think, sculpts are just not enough to put in your portfolio, especially this day and age. Like, I think the skill level of like the just new generations coming into 3D art is just so much higher, because 3D art is so much more accessible than it has ever been. So it's just like you can't get away with, doing kind of like half-assed stuff. Like, you got to really work your ass off to get something that will catch people's attention.
All right. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it? And I mean, of course, if it's something that involves an NDA, we can skip right past this question.
Yeah.
But in terms of what type of project it is, or any information that you can share with us, so we can, tune in to see, how the progress is going. What are you doing right now?
Well, at work, I can't really say what I'm working on, but on my personal work side, I've kind of been taking a break. I finished like a multi-year project last June. And so after that, I was shipping The Last of Us Part 1, so that took all my time. And, in this new year, I switched to Naughty Dog as well. So I've kind of been just focusing on that transition and stuff. But I have a couple projects on the back burner on my personal work side. Where I talked about earlier, where my furlough project was like a kind of a showpiece. This next character, I kind of actually want to use him as like an excuse to learn Unreal Engine and kind of maybe learn some like cloth simulation and blend shapes and stuff. So I think that's always a good bit of advice, to where it's kind of like, if there's a subject matter that you feel you're weak in or you want to learn, like create a project that will literally like specifically attack and force you to basically tackle those subject matter. And then in addition, I'm actually going to be taking a class at Nomen online, and that's something that I really strongly believe in, is that I think that as artists, like, we're lifelong students. Like, we may graduate, but like, we're always learning. And honestly, I feel like my learning process and like I feel like my journey as a student truly began when I graduated college, which sounds insane, but literally like a month after I graduated, I was already taking a class, and I've taken many classes since I've been in the industry, and I will always take classes. And I don't think there's any, like, again, there's no ego involved. It's just like, yeah, I know this is my weakness, and I'm gonna freaking go for it, so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I'm kind of taking a break from personal work, but I believe that there's like periods of time where you can really, really work your ass off. If you're trying to get a new studio, if you're trying to get your first job, like, the hustle, like, actually does really need to happen. It's like sometimes you just need to put in the hours and put in the work, and then other times, like, you can make the choice to take some time off and like recover and focus on your health. I mean, you should always be focusing on your health, especially like mental and physical. But there is a time for working hard, and there is a time for resting. And for me, that's right now. So yeah.
All right. And all right, this is also another interesting question. What area beside the area you're working on right now, which is of course in the realms of arts and design and visual arts, would you be interested to explore and learn in the future? Like, not just about learning things, but just, do you have any, like, big lifetime ambitions that is non-art related, that you want to go after? Like, things you want to do, places to go, new things to learn, just anything.
That's a really awesome question. I mean, my focus is always art. So, I mean, outside of that, travel, like, I think travel is the best thing like a human can do. And, we're just getting to the point where we can do that again, which is just so appreciated. I think, I do get asked this sometimes, and like I do talk about this with my colleagues sometimes, where it's like, I think a lot of people have an ambition to like be an art director or like a lead artist, lead character artist or something. And at the moment, my ambition is basically just to hopefully move into a principal role where, I just have more responsibility. I can't really see myself becoming a lead. I think what I would want to avoid was like, getting to a point where I was doing less art. Like, I just want to do more art, and I think a lot of time, like, leads have less and less time to do art, which is, it's not really what I'm looking for. Back when I was a kid or like a student, like in college, like, it's like, oh, someday I'll, be an art director. And I mean, your journey takes a lot of different paths. So it's like, maybe in several years, like, I'll change my mind. But honestly, like, Naughty Dog was a goal for me since I was a kid. And I've achieved that goal this year, and it's a very strange feeling. I almost feel like a little bit like, okay, what's next? And I think I think I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. And I think it's just kind of like enjoying the ride here, making some, hopefully some good art and working with a great team and working on some cool projects. Like, yeah. Yeah, I think just living a good life, like spending time with family, like traveling and staying healthy, staying active. And yeah, it's kind of my short-term goal.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And all right, so we've reached the end of the podcast and the last question and section, which is called time capsule. And I'm sure we can guess, what it's going to be like. And basically, let me just explain this. Imagine in a limited amount of time that you might have, let's say a couple of minutes, you have this opportunity and window of time to say anything that you want, and it's going to be recorded, and anyone in the future can hear it. So for anyone from a human to another human being who might listen to this podcast, what do you have to say? Imagine like your escape pod in the shuttle is going to be launched into the orbit of the space, and you won't be seen again, but you have some time to record some voice recordings, just some logs, for people to listen
Mm-hmm.
to if they could. What do you have to say?
This is a really cool question. Man, I think I would just say, like, do what makes you happy. And be good to each other, like be good to your fellow human beings, or aliens, whoever's going to receive this time capsule. But yeah, I think like that's like the cornerstone of like what I strive for is just like caring about one another, and then also just doing what fulfills you. Yeah. I think that's do what you love to do, period. Yeah.
All right, and I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming
Nice.
by. It was a real pleasure talking.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is your Instagram okay?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I mean, I'm not as active on those other two. I'm also on LinkedIn. Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things like, yeah, if I don't see your message, it's probably just because I've deleted Twitter. But yeah.
Instagram is a safe bet then.
Yeah, I'm usually on Instagram and ArtStation as well. But yeah, if anybody who listens to this has any kind of questions at all, I'm always open. So yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Again, thank you so much for coming by, and thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened to this. I hope you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below if you have any comments or suggestions, or just anything about the future episodes or about this episode. I'll always read all of them. And that's about it. Take care, everyone. Until next episode, stay safe. Bye.